What's going on, guys? I'm Jiffy Nano, and today we are not talking about Borderlands. Today I wanted to talk about Godfall. Godfall is a game being published by Gearbox and developed by Counterplay Games, and is what they're calling a looter slasher. As I'm sure most of you have figured out, I love loot games. I've played a lot of Destiny, Borderlands, Warframe, even Diablo and stuff like that. But I also love games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Monster Hunter, and other action RPGs, and Godfall seems to be a really awesome combination of the two, and I'm extremely excited about it. So I wanted to talk about some of the interviews they've done, some of the things they've showed off for the game, and discuss some of the things I'm excited for and the things that I think you should be excited for as well. So I'll explain more what Godfall is going to end up being as a game later on, but the first thing I'm super excited for is that this game is going to be completely PvE focused with optional co-op play with up to 3 players. I'm not sure what the trend with 3-player co-op is about, if I'm being honest. A lot of games have been moving to 3-player co-op rather than 4, like Destiny's Fire Teams, and even the new looter shooter that I'm excited for, Outriders, is only 3-player co-op. But co-op is such a fun way to play these games, and the fact that it's PvE only means there's going to be very little competitive drive in the community. This has always made communities more tight-knit and less competitive with each other, and normally leads to less toxicity amongst the players. The lack of PvP also means that we can have insane and outrageous abilities and builds that feel extremely powerful and not have to worry about any of them being overpowered against other players. Which leads me into Valor Plates. So far, we've seen 7 of the supposed 12 sets of Valor Plates. The Silvermane, the Phoenix, Greyhawk, Hinterclaw, Typhon, Vertigo, and Mesa. These Valor Plates are described to what sounds to me as more or less classes. These are not necessarily armor sets you can collect through loot, but rather are unlocked during the game and can't be mixed and matched. Each set of plates will have its own stats, passives, and abilities that will dictate the way you play alongside with the weapons you choose. Each set has an Archon ability, which seems to be something like a super from Destiny or an action skill from Borderlands, and each set has augment slots you can equip different augments inside of that act as passives that'll also affect your gameplay. For example, you could have an augment that heals you for doing certain actions and your friends doing certain actions. This kind of system allows for quite a bit of customization for builds and loadouts, and all this combined with the weapons you can choose is very exciting for theory crafters and build makers. Currently, we do not know if the weapons themselves that you loot and craft will have passive abilities as well, but we do know there are different qualities of loot like Epic and Legendary that have higher quality than lower tiers. The creative director at Counterplay Games, Keith Lee, said in an interview with GameSpot, "From our perspective, we're less about generating an infinite number of combinations, but more thinking about our loot a little more like Monster Hunter World, or maybe like God of War, where the loot itself is a bit more specific. But then, each loot piece is very meaningful or impactful if you slot it into your Valor Plate, or if you get a very specific weapon." So that's been one of the big differences, is focusing on quote-unquote quality of the loot rather than pure infinite quantity. This quote leads me to believe that higher tier loot and weapons will have specific and exclusive abilities to them, much like legendaries or exotics in games like Borderlands and Destiny. In this same interview, Keith Lee also mentioned that the combat is more so like Monster Hunter and God of War rather than a Soulsborne game where it's more encouraged to fight in groups rather than on one-on-one. They want to make sure players have a feeling of offensive power fantasy and feel like they can dominate and eviscerate their enemies if you know how to play. This also leads me to mention that they have said while this game is what they're calling a looter slasher, this game does not revolve around loot, and is more focused on mastering the combat system and building your skill set rather than high tier loot carrying you like in other loot based games. So think more Monster Hunter, where skill of the player is more important than something like Diablo and Borderlands, where skill is needed but high tier loot can make a huge difference. There are 5 weapon classes: longswords, polearms, warhammers, greatswords, and dual blades. Each weapon class has a unique playstyle consisting of movesets and abilities that, from what they have said, are consistent along each class. The longswords are your more average class, being balanced in speed, damage, and range. This is also said to be the easiest for new players with easy combos and short cooldowns. The polearms, you sacrifice damage for longer range but maintain your average speed. The Warhammers are the slowest but highest damaging weapons in the game, needing better timing and more setup than most of the other weapons. The Dual Blades, however, are the lowest damage and range but the highest speed and are ideal for single unarmored targets. Last, the two-handed greatswords are slower and deal more damage than the longsword, but isn't as slow or as damaging as the Warhammer. There is also a shield that all classes can have, and it can block incoming attacks, do counter-attack shockwaves, or even be thrown Captain America style, bouncing between enemies before coming back to the player. While we don't know a lot about the mission structure or the overarching structure of the game, we do know that there is a main hub called the 7th Sanctum, where you can change your Valor Plates, craft or upgrade items, and choose missions. From what has been described, it reminds me a lot of the ship from Warframe, where you can choose your Valor Plate, choose your up to 2 weapons, and then go out on instanced missions. The 2 mission types we know of are story missions and hunt missions. Story missions have been said to have separate enemies and bosses from the hunt missions, and they mentioned that the game has over 90 enemy types and the story missions will have mid and end bosses. Meanwhile, hunt missions sound like they're slightly less structured, and you'll set out into an area to go find a boss and kill them. Like I mentioned earlier, these missions can be done up to 3-player co-op, and there doesn't seem to be any restrictions for Valor Plates or weapons while in co-op. Counterplayed Games did mention that some plates are more suited for DPS, while some are better for debuffing or tanking. This means there are different builds you can employ for co-op that can synergize with other players. As a looter fan and a fan of action games like this has me very much looking forward to this game. I love making builds, I love finding loot, and I think if you are a fan of Borderlands, Destiny, Diablo, or anything like that, this could be the start of a really cool subgenre in the looter space, and is for sure worth checking out. I can also make more videos on Godfall as information comes out, but this is all the stuff that I thought was important and interesting at the time of recording. Please let me know in the comments if you want to see more. I would love to do breakdowns of Valor Plate abilities and theorycraft some builds as we get more info on the game. Also, if you found this video informative, a like rating is always appreciated, and consider subscribing and hitting that bell so you see my future uploads. Also, I stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday on Twitch, link in the description. If you want to talk about Godfall or any other looter or shooter related kind of stuff, we would love to have you in the stream. Lastly, if you want to support me and the content I make, you can check out my Patreon. We have lots of cool stuff over there, like exclusive sneak peeks of my new videos, including behind the scenes stuff and more, so link to that is in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.